Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. I hope that as you join us today, that you'll let us know where you're joining from. And as always, look forward to your comments and questions, and hope that you'll engage because your engagement makes the show much better and more interesting. So, Anton, you want to open up our topic for the day?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We talked last week about burnout. We talked about different sources of burnout, whether it comes from work, whether it comes from life, health. We talked about, what you can, like high level, what you could do. And let's talk today a little bit about details. So I think we'll start with work and then we'll go into life and then we'll finish up with health because kind of that's what we think about the most when it comes down to stress. So starting with work, why don't we pick one of the causes? What comes to mind from last week for you, Kevin? Like as far as a cause of burnout.
Well, the one that always stays in the forefront of my mind is misalignment in the work. We're being tasked to do things that are all primarily focused in our weakness. And so it's a constant struggle.
Okay, so how would you personally approach fixing that source of burnout at work?
Well, initially, go to your leader, your manager, whatever the title is, and say, hey, I don't think that I'm aligned here with what I can uh, do best to contribute to the team, that I'm always working from a weak position. What can we do to possibly retask? Make an appeal to them about changing some of the tasking that you're assigned with. And key thing, keep a good attitude. Don't go in demanding, but go in making an appeal in regards to a change.
Absolutely. To me, as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking to myself, a coaching culture needs to be established, right? In order to do that, once again, the problem in itself is yes, people are doing things in their weakness, they're not focusing on their strengths. But to me, even deeper, I think the symptom is lack of coaching culture and lack of
Mm-hmm.
coaching skills by the leadership. So what I would do in this situation is I would take leaders through the skill training that they need as far as coaching goes. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't just go from low level or mid level managers. Everybody should be coaching somebody, and the highest person, highest people up may need to be paying somebody to be coaching them, right? Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
the organization can do it, but somebody needs to be doing it. And I think that's a solution to many of the problems, people problems that we would talk about today, right? I think another thing that would fall under that is going to be um, performance management, right? We talked about performance management last week as being a big source of stress. If somebody's being regularly coached, if they're meeting with their person, once a week, once every couple of weeks, which usually I recommend once a week meeting,
Right.
uh, unless you are, really high up and you're coaching somebody on a much larger team, which you
Mm-hmm.
should, right? Like if that's happening temporarily, fill it in, but then at the same time hire supervisors that can execute because you don't want a team that's too big.
Right.
Remember, Kevin, I think I want to say it's over 8 people considered it too big of a team. One person should not be ever supervising more than eight. I think six is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Remember,
The span of control is 4 to 6 for any one individual.
so in your organization, if that's higher, you guys need to figure out how do we get more smaller span of control so that way that person can have more touches, right? More
Mm-hmm.
frequent touches. Because if that's happening, then when I come in from a performance review, really it's just a summary of a lot of the content that we've already covered and a lot of the progress we've made. Right. I've had my expectations established for me. I've been coaching how I'm doing with them. My leading indicators have been, telling me that I'm progressing correctly, like all these kind of things. And those are the two biggest components that can be addressed with coaching. So you got your people working in their weakness need to be working in their strengths, and then performance management. Um, what others come to mind? And folks, feel free to type in if anything we can discuss specific to what you have. We got quiet group today.
Yeah, it is a little quiet. That's all right. Hopefully, we'll hear from them in a bit. Another one has to do with the current issues that we're dealing with about flexibility, talking about being able to be flexible in our work schedule. That is a hot topic, and I think it should be. And as you and I have talked about, we need to have companies consider the concept of strategic flexibility, not a one size fits all. Everybody stays home, everybody comes to the office. It needs to be such that it is truly flexible depending on the person and their needs. Welcome, Rana. Glad to have you today. Appreciate you checking in. And feel free to comment or question as we go along. So, anyway, the strategic flexibility, I think, is another potential burnout issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely, or lack of it, right? The lack of
Right. Lack of it. Yes.
stability. And absolutely. I mean, I'm a single parent with three kids that each of them has stuff going on, doctor's appointments, have to be out of work at a certain time to get my middle into practices and pick up my youngest one from daycare. I mean, it's a lot. And if I don't have that, honestly, I couldn't work in where I work. Like
Right.
I was starting out this consulting company. It was a big thing where everybody was talking about travel. But I talked to the recruiter, like, hey, we don't travel as much anymore ever since COVID. But at the same time, like they're super flexible. I love this company. They let me do what I need to do to take care of my life. And what does that make me do? It makes me perform. It makes me want to
Mhm.
keep the flexibility. It makes me want to have the job. But I do think there's a careful way to go about it, right? It's not just about no oversight, right? I
Right.
think it's probably a argumentative point that many people say, well, just trust your people. Like, why do you think so many people are coming back to the office? Like now I heard Salesforce who claim they will never have to, they're coming back to the office. Like there's just so many companies that are bringing people back to the office. There's a reason for it. People need some level of oversight.
Hmm.
It's unfortunate because we don't live in a perfect world where everything can be just outcome based. But the thing is, it's like we can't grow our outcomes year over year, quarter over quarter, wherever it may be, if we don't have oversight enough on them, because we're just driving people to a imaginary number without ever seeing person's potential. And if we have to interact with them, be with them more often. And I know this is not popular because everybody wants to work from home. I do too. But I'm also a realist and say managers have to have some sort of oversight. That's called managing, and that's still part of the job.
Well, and the other thing, we tend to go to extremes. Right now, everybody says everybody stay home and work from home. There are people temperamentally that will not work well in that environment. They need that structure, and they need the social interaction. And so, again, strategic flexibility versus all remote work or all office, it has to be the right fit for our teams. And as a leader, we've got to consider those things and find the right fit and make opportunity for the various types of fit. And the more we can do that, the better. And how you have accounting for people in different situations varies. Some people are, as you say, they're going to need more direct oversight, and it's not they're bad people. It's a temperament and personality piece, and that makes a difference versus some that you give them that goal, the you know different checkpoints, whatever, and then cut them loose, and they'll produce and they'll overproduce because you've given them that chance. But again, not a one size fits all. We got to be mindful of all the possibilities. Welcome, Sharon and Zaid. Good to see you guys this morning. Always good to hear from you. Look forward to your comments as well. So anyway, the being careful with any of the solutions to avoid or deal with burnout is that there's one way that fits everybody, and not the case.
And this boils down to a solution of a culture. It's a cultural reset. It
Yeah.
has to happen. And some of our audience have experienced poor leadership, and unfortunately it's tough to do this from a bottom up standpoint, right? It's hard for employees to manage up and get their leaders to do some of these things, whether it be the coaching we talked about, whether
Mhm.
it be, setting their schedules, giving the flexibility. Honestly, this is where senior leadership, or C-level leadership in particular, needs to say, this is what we care about our people. We want them to be happy. We want them to have freedom. We want them to, be empowered and all these kind of things. But the training has to come from the top. Like what normally happens in this world is somebody hires consultants like Kevin and I, to come in, take a look at what's going on, really assess. A lot of times, if you guys don't know how this works, we don't just kind of come in and be like, okay, this is what you do. No, we have to assess the situation. We have to really understand what is going on, figure out target outcomes with the leadership, hopefully also involving, frontline whenever we can, and then tailoring education to meet those, targets that we're trying to meet, and by overcoming the gaps that we've assessed, right? That's really how that would work. And senior leadership has to want that. They have to want to hire a company like us, or a different, thousands of them out there, to assess and retrain and educate. Because in the process, we also need to inspire. We need to get these leaders re-engaged and really feeling like they're leading versus just checking boxes and getting through the day like many leaders are these days. So unfortunately, with the stuff that we're talking about from a work standpoint, it's tough, right? So what is less tough sometimes, not always, are the other two categories, right? Work kind of is got to come from the top, but your life and your health, there's a
Mm.
lot more controllables there compared to your work. Work doesn't have as many controllables, where your life and your health do. So from a life standpoint, Kev, what some of the major stressors that we've discussed in the past that come to mind to you as far as burnout goes?
Well, one of the things that, of course, at my age and stage in life is considering legacy and dealing with legacy. The question becomes what happens when I'm gone, because that is a more imminent event in my life. And so, answering that question, dealing with that issue, is one of the stressors. And that, depending on situation, if you're in question enough and struggling enough, of course, that can cause burnout too.
And what in your mind are some of the suggestions that people can implement to combat this issue?
First, faced inevitability. We're going to be passed on at some point. So, with that in mind, what do we want to do? What is the legacy we want to leave? And begin to ask the questions: what are we doing to prepare for that legacy? And it's really funny. I have family that's in the insurance business, and they'll tell you one of the hardest things is to get people to consider life insurance and get into various approaches in that regard. But it just goes to a mindset that we have. We don't want to talk about the fact that one day we're going to be gone. And the sooner that we can begin to address it and get a plan on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually, uh, then we can begin to address it and come up with something that allows us to not have to have that churning in the back of our mind all the time. Because legacy is one of those that's not right in your face most of the time. Now, I will suggest that part of what we dealt with mental and emotional stressors during the pandemic is that, as a wholesale effect, everyone was forced to consider their mortality. And I think we saw a lot of response from that, a lot of stress, because people haven't addressed that. And it's not often that we, as a culture, a society, a large group, have to face those things. And I think the impact was remarkable. In fact, I think we're still sorting through the impact of that. And but yeah, legacy. Consider what is our legacy? What do we want it to be? Because at some point it's going to happen. We just need to be prepared and make the plans to begin to address what we can control. Again, we don't want to focus on what we can't control, but the things we can control, make choices and get a plan for it.
And two things jump out at me. Plan one,
Yeah.
right? You The issue is with things like very high level concepts like legacy. We constantly have a moving target, so we're assessing without really having a set target. So you made great progress, but because your target's constantly moving, you're not celebrating, or you're still feeling burnt out. You're still having those negative thoughts. So the plan is part number one. Second thing that you said that really jumps out at me, I think, is a bigger issue. It's more of a root cause. We're disconnected from our future selves.
Mm,
That is across the board in so many ways: our finances, our relationships, our health, you name it. And I've experienced this. I've talked about this many times, in the past. I When I first started out in the fitness industry in early 2000s, I still had people coming in for consultations and bringing up their future health as a reason for why they're there. Right? They would say my parents had X issues and I don't want to have them, or
hmm
I just see people in my family have them, or I just don't want to end up like this at all. As maybe 5 to 10 years went by and we got to late 2000s, early 2010s, I stopped hearing that. Right, I did more consultations at those points than I did even back in the early 2000s, meeting more people, more conversations around what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish in health, and hardly anybody ever brought that up anymore. And that's when I heard a conversation by psychologists talking about how we as people are disconnected from our future self
hmm
more than any generations ever. And that comes from, you can look at sustainability. There's so many different things that tie into it, and that's a root cause problem. So connect with your future self, right? Like,
hmm
a lot of times it's like when you go to a therapist, people talk about your inner child and they talk about like connect with yourself back then. Well, I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying connect
hmm
with your future self, connect with that older woman, older man that comes to a point where life is coming to an end, and what do you want that to be? How do you feel in those moments? Like, and all of the stuff that we're talking about right now will tie into it, right? So with life, I think the other big one is relationships. I think this
hmm
falls into the same thing. I don't need anybody. I'm fine right now. And then you realize later on in your life, like, relationships is all you got. Like, that's really what defines your life. So what I think a lot of times gets in the way of relationships is our ego. So
hmm
check your ego at the door when it comes to relationships, because there's so much stress you're carrying because of it, right? So let go of the ego and let yourself dive into the relationships. And honestly, like, that allows you to turn the other cheek, and oftentimes that solves some of these really ongoing nagging issues in family relationships. For one, right? Somebody won't apologize for something that was said at a Christmas dinner one day or Thanksgiving meal or whatever, and it's just harbors and grows, and sometimes it poisons other people in our relationships because not in the family, now they got to take sides. So check your ego and realize that you're not as big as you are, and it's better to fix something than carry the stress of that burden for a long time. And it's okay if it's you always fixing it. Like, I've been that person in my life. It's not about how many times you do it. It's about your own peace that it's all about.
Well, we talked yesterday about on Wisdom Seeker about forgiveness. One of the challenges that we really face, and this unforgiveness will cause a great deal of stress in our lives. If we choose not to either give forgiveness or to receive forgiveness, it will cause a lot of stress for us. And if one of the best things we can do is, as you say, one of the steps in that process, check the ego. What's going on here, and what can I do about it? Do I need to go to someone and ask their forgiveness because I hurt them, I wronged them? Even though it wasn't intentional, it still doesn't change the fact that it happened. Or am I harboring some issues because I feel like that I should be asked for forgiveness by someone? Not just ignoring those things aren't healthy. And there are ways to go about addressing that need and doing it in a good fashion. So, yeah, holding on to that can, unforgiveness can destroy a relationship and or prevent us from having relationships. And it's unfortunate. I think we've all been around someone that is in that situation, and eventually it becomes a root of bitterness. And you get around that kind of people, and you just go, "Ooh, I don't even want to be in the room with them."
You got a comment from Sharon.
Yeah, let's see what Sharon says. Sharon, a lot of people over 65 plus are afraid to talk about legacy and death. My mother, should rest in peace, was one of them. It took me a while to talk to her about death. A lot of people are afraid if you talk about death, you're going to die. Not true. You should try to prepare. You're right, Sharon. Definitely. Anton, your thoughts on Sharon's comment?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the elephant in the room that is always going to be there, and you need to address it. I mean, it's many reasons, right? Sometimes stress comes not from our own fear of death, but from fear of what we're leaving behind, and how
Mm,
maybe unprepared we've left people behind. You know, as parents, we can always think that way. I know my mom will think that way until she dies. It doesn't matter what I do or where I'm at in my life. She's always going to think she's got to prepare me more. But that's the reality, because one is making sure that you're okay with it, but two is making sure that you're okay with what you're leaving behind. And chances are, if you actually work through that with your family, you're going to feel a lot better about it. So that's a really good point, Sharon.
I know people that aren't afraid of death. They're afraid of how they're going to die. And that's a real struggle. The concern of just wasting away, so to speak, or, um, current issues that we see a lot of is related to dementia and memory loss and Alzheimer's. And it's not the fear of dying itself, but what happens on our trek to in that process. And I understand it's something, me, frankly, I'm good with just boom, I'm gone. The idea of dealing with disease or mental issues and wasting away slowly is a little bit unnerving. But it's something we can't, well, okay. I was going to say we can't control it. We may not control it, but, and it's something we talk about, is we can influence it by being healthy. And the healthier we are, the better our chance of coming to our end in a better fashion, I would say. Can't control it, but we can certainly influence it by making good choices as part of our life choices. And that's part of what we're talking about today. We may not be able to control much, but we can sure influence it by good choices and awareness. A big challenge with all of these things, burnout and stress and all of these issues, starts with awareness. And our culture is not, we talk about awareness, but we do not encourage the behavior to be aware. And part of that is because we have so much busyness in our life, and that's a real enemy to being aware of what's going on with us. If we've got all this activity stirring all the time, it's almost like a drug that numbs us from dealing with the awareness in our life. And so, just like culture is a large umbrella factor, awareness is a big umbrella factor, because the more aware we are, greater chance we're going to have to find these issues and deal with them.
One of the prevailing signs of burnout is, and also causes of it, is inability to stay present, inability to
Mm,
be in the moment that we're in right now. We're either in the past, or more often we're in the future, worried about something. And especially in the life side, I think the stuff that you're talking about, excuse me, is most important, because so many of our thoughts that our brain is always preoccupied, that keeps us from being in the present, have to do with things that we can't control.
mm,
And or they come from worrying about lack of action about things that we can control, right?
Hmm.
So take action, right? So take action, identify what it is that I'm worried about that I can actually do something about, right? Whether it be, we talk about dementia and how we can die not in a good way when we get older. Am I doing what I can to prevent that from happening? What's
Hmm.
in my power? Am I eating healthy? Am I watching my blood sugar? Am I, doing all those other things, engaging my brain, trying to keep my memory good, and all those things? If the answer is yes, let it go, right? Let it go and stop fixating on it. Like it's going to happen how it's going to happen, nothing you can do about it. But at the same time, it's not about not acting. You just need to identify what you can act on and then continue to act on that. And things will get better in your brain overall.
Well, and one of the keys I think we're kind of hitting around is balance. We've got to consider the past and the future. It's got to be a part of our awareness, but not to a point that we aren't completely present in the moment. And we tend to think of one or the other, but we've got to really have both going on. And that's balance, something we talk about all the time. And it's very important that we maintain that balance in our life, in our work, in all aspects. Let's see. Zaid has a question. Why would normal people like me would care so much about legacy after death? I doubt anyone would remember me in a day or two after I'm gone. Zaid, I think that is one question that is prevalent in people's mind. Why do I matter? Why am I significant? And if I'm when I'm gone, will it matter to anyone? And I think you're hitting right on a question that we need to address. And what well, I come to think of a movie. Anton, are you familiar with It's a Wonderful Life? I think everybody knows It's a Wonderful Life. And one of the great things about that movie is at one point, the main character in the movie asks, he's so discouraged by his circumstances, he says, well, I'm better off dead than alive. And even maybe better off if I'd never been born. And so it's going to what you're talking about there, Zaid, that thought process. And part of what we really should do as part of our awareness is think about the impact that we have. And there is no one around that does not have impact in the lives of others and in the world around them. That's something I can state without equivocation, that we all have impact. And when we're gone, we will be missed. No, we may not have a building named after us or a street named after us, but there are people that we are impacting. And by the way, the healthier we are in our lives, the greater that impact. And so then began to ask the question, what is the impact that I hope for? And that becomes a part of our legacy. Anton, your thoughts on
Yeah,
question?
absolutely. So I think Zeke, you're fairly on the younger side, compared to like, you're probably not at a point in life where you're close to your deathbed by anything like that, by any measure.
Not
So
old like me.
Kevin, you still got a long way to go too, brother. But the point is like it's where you are right now. Is that gonna stay that way later in your years, right? Like it's not about like if people are going to remember. It's more importantly, do you want to be remembered? Right? That's the first question. It's not about whether or not at this moment in your life you're able to do something that's worthy of legacy that some people would consider, right? Like legacy can mean, as Kevin talking about, just a few people around you. But the question is there going to come a time in your life later on where things look terminal, right? You're coming to an end of this road, and are you going to be thinking in your head, I wish I could have done more to impact those around me? Now, somebody might say, I just want to be the best friend to all the people around me. Like somebody that doesn't have family, somebody that doesn't have anything, and they're just like, I want to fill people's cups so much that when I'm old, they're going to remember how I made them feel. Right? It's not about building a building with your name on it or a street, you know, after you're creating a massive discovery of some sort. Those are great, don't get me wrong. But some people may say, I just want to be remembered like this, whether it be by the 5 people that are my best friends and they're going to die with me, but while, you know, they're still alive, they're going to carry my memory. The point is, comes back to what we talked about earlier. Have a plan. What are you going to be happy with, right? How are you going to define laying on your deathbed and going, this is what's going to make me feel good about the life that I lived? And it comes back to the plan, having a plan, having an idea of what you want to do, and then pushing towards that target and doing many, many different things throughout your life to accomplish that. Because the reality is, many people may be content with very small legacy, but very many people may simply say they don't want to leave a legacy because they think they're not capable of leaving a legacy. And that's the stressful one. That's the thing that's going to eat at people in the back of their head all the time because they feel like they should, but they're justifying to themselves, you know, somehow why they don't want to or don't need to. Right. So just be real with yourself and put yourself into that future, connect to the future self, right, that we talked about before, and see what you want as your future self.
Well, and Zaid asked a follow-on question: Is do you think this is more about Western cultures? And I do. I think this lack of understanding and lack of willingness to address legacy is part of the Western culture, and I think that's tied into the fact that in our Western culture, the legacy that everybody wants or thinks about involves uh, big name financial success. You know, again, buildings named after you, streets named after you, schools, and what most of the cultures around the world still have as part of their culture, and unfortunately, the westernization is affecting them. But they still have a view of family and spiritual legacy and other legacy components that are not tied to so-called success. It's tied to living more richly as a person, and ultimately, our best chance at having a solid, enduring legacy, and Anton talked about it, kind of hinted at this, is being us, finding out who we are and living us the best that we can live us. And the reason I say that is each of us is designed with a purpose that can't be accomplished by anyone else. And that's what is missed is when it comes time, that part we play in the lives of others is gone. And, you know, then we miss that. And I'll share personally, you know, it's just over 2 years ago that my brother passed away. And it wasn't anything that uh, that I miss about that. It is in addition to just the loss of my brother, but the loss of relationship, the loss of impact that that relationship had, and those are powerful. And the power of that is that my brother and I were not just blood relatives, but we were closest of best friends, and he was a confidant in my life. So, and what he did was he lived his life in such a way that it impacted and influenced mine, and I tried to do the same. And that makes a big hole when it's gone. So, Zaid, the idea of being missed, at a minimum, if we live us according to the way we are designed, we will be missed in the lives of some people. Now, will we make the news paper and all that? I don't know, but the reality is very few people do that anyway, and it's not. In fact, if you look into the lives of a lot of these people that had all those trappings and everything, when it came down to their last minutes and hours, those things weren't important to them. And so, yeah, I appreciate that struggle, though. Let's see. Sharon had a comment here. Uh, uh, Kevin and Anton, that's where I am now. Unfortunately, my husband is not well, having heart trouble, and the doctors have been terrible and not helpful to him. It's been hard. Um, yeah, struggling with the latter part of our life is a challenge, and it's a real stressor. And trying to address that is really the goal that we should have. And what that looks like varies by person. Some of us just need that self awareness and people around us that can help us walk through it. Others need professional people in their life to help them deal with it, not just the physical aspects, but the mental and emotional strains and stresses. So I understand, Sharon, it is hard, as you said. Um, let's see, Sharon also. Um, let's see here, Anton, Kevin, that is what I am trying to do now. Focus on what needs to be done to get him healthy and not get crazy over his heart problem. It's hard because he is very depressed and disgusted. We are finally trying to still get another heart doctor, and this new one seems to have the same attitude as the old one had. Uh, again, solutions are hard. Part of it, and this is something that we talked about earlier, and I'll share from my own experience and thought, as again, I'm facing some of these issues with my mom, and of course, at my age myself, but addressing the fact that there is the inevitable that we're all going to die. So, what are we doing? Where are we at in facing that and preparing for it? What does that look like for us? And have we been able to make peace with that inevitability? And it's a struggle. It's a big struggle, but one that is worth focusing in on and investing our time and energy in on, because it's going to happen. Anton, your thoughts? I've been talking a lot here.
No, it's all right. And Sharon, I'm sorry, what you're dealing with. Just a couple of things, my 2 cents. There's two sides to this, right? What you're dealing with, having him experience everything, and the second part is what he's dealing with, right? And you have just as much stress as he has dealing with the actual problem because you're there to support, and it can be tough, right? I'm reading into your words a little bit, and you're trying to do some things, but he's probably not super motivated because you're saying he's depressed and disgusted. And my two things I would mention is one, for you, realizing you're doing everything you can do, right? And then finding peace in that he has to make some of the choices himself, irrelevant of anything. He has to invest into wanting to get better, and you can't carry the load completely by yourself because that'll wear you out and burn you out faster than anything. So coming back to, are you doing what you can? Are you influencing him? Are you recommending things? Are you putting him in an environment where he can make healthy choices and different things like that? But then ultimately letting go the rest
Mm.
because the choice still falls upon him to make. The second point is about him. When I hear the word depressed and maybe lacking action and some of the things that he should be doing, um, trying to find purpose somehow, right? Trying to find, from what I've seen later in years, people kind of go, it is what it is. Like I'm just gonna struggle through this, and then my time's gonna come, and then I'm done. And what I've seen with those kind of statements is people don't have enough purpose, right?
Mm.
Maybe they feel like they can't make enough impact around them anymore, or it's irrelevant whether they're around or not. Whatever that, there's so many different ways to find purpose, but just try to have him find purpose because he's still got a lot of life to live, irrelevant how long that is, because he can still accomplish a lot, whether it be just in your life, whether it be in kids' life, and whatever it may be. But there's got to be something that's getting him out of bed and getting him to want to improve. And if that's lacking, that's a really tough battle.
Yeah, and I have to share that there is power in what Anton's talking about. A good friend of mine lost his wife about a year ago, and for a long time, he was basically just going through the motions, enough to survive every day, eat, sleep, clean, those kinds of things. And so one of the things that I encouraged him to do is he needed to find purpose. He needed to be find a way to be productive or feel productive. And what's really been remarkable is he's taken some steps to do that, and his whole demeanor has changed. His whole outlook has improved. He's actually been able to get off of medications that he was using to help him get through, because just by finding a purpose. And it doesn't have to be a physical purpose, it could be a purpose that mainly requires our mental and emotional output, like Anton says, to children, to grandchildren, to other family, to friends. And so having that purpose is truly, truly powerful and really impactful. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Welcome, Rick. Glad to have you. Uh, Appreciate you being here late or not. And so, and then Zaid makes a comment, and this is another piece um, of something we have to deal with that is out there. Last Sunday, 2 days ago, one of our Sunday school members, healthy and not at the point of death, passed away with no warning. I think that death is being part of being alive. Anton, you want to respond to that?
Contentness and acceptance of death is so huge. If a person
Mm,
can really accept it, and your statement that you're making, death being part of life, becomes a natural thing, and we're here until we're not, that's a huge step in the peace direction, right? And into freedom of just living. But there's, see, the thing is, like, sometimes I hear people say, death is a natural part of life and it is what it is. But are they controlling what they need to be controlling? Right. I've also seen that statement as a white flag of I don't care, like just giving up on life and saying
hmm
it in a way that is just like it'll come, whatever, I'm nothing I can do about it. And they live in a very bad way. So
mm,
as long as we're still living in a good way with the presumption that we want to live into our 70s, 80s, whatever it may be, with health and those kind of things, but with a realization that we may not, right? That's the caveat there. We can't just be like, oh, it is what it is, nothing I can do matters because I might die tomorrow anyway. That's not a good answer in my book, at least.
mm. No, I agree with you, Anton. And one of my favorite sayings that I've heard is that we need to plan like we're going to live forever, but we need to live like today is our last day. And that balance has got to be there. And again, Zaid, your question about Western culture. One of the things unique to Western culture is that we make assumptions because of medical interventions, technology, different things, that somehow we can cheat death. People don't really say it, but they behave like it in their choices. And the reality is, we're not going to cheat death, and death can come at any moment. We're lulled into this sense of security that if we do all the right things, that we'll live forever. But we we risk every day. If you get in a car, especially here in Atlanta, I don't know other places have the same issues, but you get in a car, your risk of not surviving the day is high. And recognizing that is part of life, but like Anton said, not giving up, but rather, okay, I could die tomorrow. What do I want to leave behind? How do I want the world to see who I am, what I am when that happens? And think of it in a positive, more productive way, and think of it in terms of what can we control, and the things we can control we should work on. And it may be that we want to be remembered as the kindest, most compassionate person in the world. Okay, doesn't take money, doesn't take anything but a choice, and start living it. And then when we do that, we find that our legacy becomes a natural outcome of who we are and what we do. So uh, we don't have a guarantee for tomorrow. And that has nothing to do with age, has everything to do with the way life can unfold. And as a result, that should cause us to live in the present. And it should cause us, even at earlier ages, to consider what about the future? See, again, unfortunately, and it's more prevalent in the Western culture, is youth is the prime and therefore our focus and our concern. Yeah, youth is fine. I appreciate that. But we need to consider I'm not going to be young forever. I'm not going to be physically as capable forever. And as we begin to consider those things and plan for them and make them part of our thought process in a healthy fashion, then we have a much better chance of actually living rather than having this churning in the back of our head all the time, which stresses us and keeps us from living well. So, Anton, any further thoughts on that one?
You know, it, last thing, not even specifically to that, but just all of what we're talking about. When it comes down to life, like want what you want, but make sure what you say to yourself you want, you actually
Mm,
want, right? Like, don't fool yourself into saying that you don't want legacy, but you actually do want legacy. Don't fool yourself into saying you're fine being alone, yet you want relationships. Like, I see this often happening where people try to convince themselves otherwise and be like, I'm just fine. No, you're not fine. You're putting up this facade, this outward thing that you're okay, but deep down you're not, and that's going to continue to burn you out because there's a mismatch between what you want and what you're actually behaving like or what your life is like. And so many people get comfortable living in that, right, justifying what they're lacking because they're saying they don't want it. So just assess that, because I'm not saying everybody wants the same thing, right? To the other point of Western, we're talking about legacy in the Western side of the world, we have grandiose legacies. I think that's maybe another take at that comment is like in the Western side, we feel like they have to be these massive things. I got to make, $1 million fund for college, or I got to build this building, whatever it may be, right? Like, bring it to your level that you feel comfortable with and you're happy with. But I bet you if we dug and I spent some time one-on-one in a life coaching, session
mm,
with somebody, we'd find that just about every person has some desire for legacy. That legacy shows up in many different ways, right? So the reason I'm saying all this is one of the other burnout factors that we experience in life that we haven't talked about is mismatch of our identity, right? Who we are on the inside is not matching who we are on the outside, whether it's
hmm
our job, our car, our house, the way we talk to people every day, right? I think it's one of the biggest causes. And then what it does, it constantly eats at us over and
hmm
over and over, right? I mentioned that not being able to be present is one of the signs of burnout, but also one of the leading symptoms to it, or I should say, one of the leading causes to it. It kind of goes back and forth. And when you don't have that set identity, you're not going to have the peace necessary to live life in a way that you want to live it. So figure out who you are, and there's never too late for that, right? Like if you feel like you're 50 and you've been not living in congruence with who you are, reset, right?
mm,
Reset. It's not about how you've been going, it's how you finish. This is really important when it comes down to identity. It's all about how you finish because you're building it, you're growing it, you're maturing it. Eventually, it's going to come a point where you don't have any time left. So start eventually, but it's not too late.
Well, and sometimes some of the self discovery requires someone outside of ourselves. Okay. There have been points in my life where I have had to get outside help. I have gone to a professional therapist before dealing with life issues. I have purposely surrounded myself with people that are wiser than myself, that have uh, greater insights and all to let and allow them, give them permission to speak to me about what they observe. And so, if you're struggling with some of this, be willing to get someone to help with that perspective. A lot of times, what we need is accurate perspective because we get so close to our circumstances and our struggles that we can't see the bigger picture perspective. And so it may be that you need to get someone to walk through that with you.
And it's not just about accurate. Like I think the bigger picture one is more important. Sometimes it's just expanding our view. That
Mhm.
something else may not tell you a perfect accurate picture, but they're going to add a piece to this completeness of the picture that gives you a better evaluation when you're thinking about it, right? So, and plug for Kevin here, guys. Like if you are needing some advice in that area and being able to like sit down with somebody that'll counsel you through it, Kevin, plug for you, man. You would be a great fit for that. I've used Kevin in some life advice situations many times, and he does it very well to where it's not like here's the answer. He'll help lead you to an answer like a good coach does. So if you guys need some wisdom in your life, reach out to Kevin and sit down and make some of these plans together.
Well, and that's why I like to encourage everybody to seek wisdom because it's about seeing that bigger picture, and it's such a critical piece. Let's see. Sharon has a follow-on comment. So very true. I'm trying to encourage him to have a better attitude. It's hard, but I'm trying my best. Kevin, I like both of your attitudes. I have to try to get him to be more positive. Sharon, one thought is rather than trying to push him to a different attitude, maybe offer suggestions of things that will bring a more positive attitude, like purpose. Maybe help him find something that, even though he's physically challenged at the moment, help him find something in his life, a way to be purposeful, rather than trying to push him to have a better attitude, push him to take steps or make choices that will enable the attitude to come along. Just a thought. And
And,
Tom,
and, and when it comes to results pyramid, right? We talked about this long time ago. We make a mistake, whether it be leading at work or whether it be leading people around us, relationships. We want a different outcome for them. So we think we need to get them to do a different action that leads to a different outcome, right? That's the logical thing to do. But the problem is when you're at the peak of that pyramid, you want a different outcome. You have to go all the way down to the bottom of the pyramid. You don't just start one step below. It has to come from the bottom and raise up. So what I mean by that is actions are driven by beliefs. So you want certain different actions for him to happen, but his beliefs are lacking something, whether it
mm-hmm.
be purpose, whether it be whatever else, that are leading to those actions. And what's underneath the beliefs are set by experiences, right? So it's his current experiences are leading to a certain belief that's leading to lack of action that's making certain outcomes not possible, right? So if you really want to try to influence them, you have to find a way to recreate an experience that can set the right belief, that can lead to the right action, can change the outcome. And what I mean by that is like Kevin's example, right? Purpose. Can you do something to where he still feels like he made a difference? Whether it be like volunteering, it could be, I don't know the situation, right? So I'm just spitballing out there, but like if there's grandkids around, maybe it's them. If there's not, maybe it's volunteering, maybe it's finding ways and actually going through the action and then celebrating that positive outcome in the end. So what does that do? Positive experience. Now we're going from I can't do anything. I might as well just, live this out and then be done versus wait, I still got time. I can use that time to create more of these things. So now we're opening up that belief and then ultimately it'll lead to different actions.
And if there's physical limitations, the beauty of technology now, recording, reading books to children, grandchildren, um, recording, reading so that maybe other people, blind people that can't see the books, can have the audio put. There are different ways, even with our physical limitations, if we're willing to do things that are impactful on others and thus giving us the satisfaction of being purposeful, being productive, and contributing to the lives of others. When there's a principle out there, and you can choose to accept it or not, but it's a truth. And that is when we are the neediest, is when we need to focus on helping other people. It is a principle that is certain, and that if we're in needy, then the more we focus on helping others, especially in the area of our own need, it has an amazing positive impact in our life. You can write that one down and bank on it. And maybe for your husband, Sharon, Anton's talking about belief. Maybe some good reading material right now to help adjust, began to help him adjust with his beliefs, drive a change in his beliefs. And so there are some different things to consider. And I believe that you are a wonderful individual to be able to help him. And don't be afraid to ask for others to input, because one of the interesting thing about marriage relationships, sometimes we as a spouse are the last one to bring effect and change to our spouse's life, not, or at least directly. Quite often, we use influence to help our spouse's significant other. And so it may be the biggest influence you can have is help find someone in your family, your life, that can come alongside with your husband and be that person to walk through what Rick's famous line is, that 2 a.m. friend. Maybe your husband needs a 2 a.m. friend in his life right now. And so maybe your focus could be on how to help him find that 2 a.m. friend. Just a thought there. Let's see. Zaid makes a comment. Uh, Anton, that white flag is surrender. I'm not talking about that. But like you said, to have that peace that things will change or end at any point. Working in the health field made it more clear to me. Um, Attitude. And like Anton said, beliefs. Beliefs drive so much about us. The problem is we don't spend time understanding our beliefs and developing them purposefully. Thoughts on that, Anton?
No, absolutely. I mean, spot on. All your comments are right where they land right on the spot, Zaid. I mean, your next one, care too much about purpose in life rather than focusing on legacy. Potato, right? Like it's what are we calling it? You legacy to somebody may mean something different, right? That's why some of these conversations are hard to have when you're talking to a screen. It's just me and Kevin, and we're not talking about our own. We're talking about generalities, right? Like purpose and legacy can be interchangeable, in my opinion, right? Like if you lived a life full of purpose, you've done a legacy, right? Like that doesn't mean legacy is not just about like how I want to be remembered. It's just how I want to live. And
Yes.
if how I live is good, I'm going to be either remembered or I'm going to make the impact that I need. Trust me, you're still going to have peace when it comes down to laying on your deathbed and remembering your life. You're still going to feel happiness and contentment and not stress because you've lived life full of purpose.
Well, and yes, the two are interchangeable, because the best legacy is to be who we're designed to be, whatever that looks like. And the truest legacy is in that fashion. If we just really seek to understand who we are and our unique qualities. And by the way, and I got to put this in here, I know I get on this sometimes, but your value. First thing you need to get a hold of is your value. And your value's been established. What you do or don't do won't change your value. What other people do or don't do won't change your value. Your value's intrinsic, it's there. So focus not on trying to establish your value, but focus on living the value that you are. And when we do that, our legacy will take care of itself. And we will. And sometimes what we have to do is stop and take stock of how we're living to understand that impact. If you're living you, you will have impact. And if you stop and say, wow, I did this the other day, and this happened with this person at work, in the neighborhood, at church, whatever. When sometimes we just need to stop and look and see the impact we have. Now, the problem with a lot of people is their impact may be negative, and they don't want to face that. And that's the challenge of self-awareness. There are people afraid of what they're going to find if they become self-aware. But again, I go back. Self-awareness has nothing to do with understanding your value. That's done. And the sooner that people accept that their value is what their value is, and it's remarkably great value, and then go on to look at purpose and things, we look at it differently. And so if your purpose, a lot of people, they want to make their purpose about earning their value. Doesn't make a difference. So therefore, free your purpose up to be what you are, who you are, but find out what that is. And when you start doing that, and we've talked about this, and you get vision. Legacy is built into your vision. People think about vision in different ways, but vision is ultimately a major part of what your legacy should be. And part of the reason people don't have legacy is they don't have vision. They depend on vision other places, but they don't have one for their own life. And that makes a huge impact. Again, once I finally got a hold of understanding the vision for my life, it impacted and changed me remarkably. And, my vision in life is about helping people find their potential. And as I came to terms with that, it changed my whole perspective on what I was doing. And yeah, legacy is a term, it's a word for reference, but at the end of the day, living purposefully is the legacy. Ultimately, that's how we approach making our legacy, is to find out who we are and live that person. Let's see, we've got, wow.
I think we got to wrap up, Kevin. We're 3 minutes over.
Oh my goodness. Time flies when we're having fun.
Good conversation. Lost track of time, but no, just thank you so much for the comments. I always want to show gratitude. I
Yes.
can't express it enough that we would not be doing this if it's not for the core of people that show up week in and week out and engage with us and make this show a lot more entertaining and a lot more real, right? Like when you guys share a real story, Sharon, thank you so much. Lee, thank you so much. It makes this conversation so much better than us just talking about figurative things in the clouds.
Yes. This is not the Anton and Kevin show. This is Human SOS, and that's what drives it. And you are the Human SOS movement. We're not. And so thank you. We'll be back again next week. If you have suggestions on topics, feel free to offer them. Rick, thanks for your comment about health issues. That's one of the struggles. I suggest that the best way to deal with health issues is recognize at some point our health will be gone because our life will end, making the most of what we have. So thanks, everybody. God bless. We really appreciate you so much. Hope to see you next week. Maybe bring a friend along. Take care. Bye.
Bye.